My name is Maya Ellison. I'm 35 years old and the director of a nonprofit healthcare organization in Chicago. I've grown used to being forgotten by my own family, but I never imagined that even on my sister's wedding day, I'd still be nothing more than a shadow on the sidelines. Everyone stayed silent as my stepmother raised her glass to Chelsea, the only daughter who ever made this family proud. I smiled faintly, swallowing the pain, but when the priest suddenly pulled a letter from his pocket and said, "Before we begin the ceremony, Maya has something to share," my heart stopped. I had never written anything, so what was in that letter? Who gave it to him? And why? Did it have my name on it? Have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? Leave a comment below if you've ever felt completely alone in a room full of people. Hit like, subscribe, and follow along as I share the story behind that letter and why it brought the entire wedding to a halt in just a few minutes. I was born from my father's first marriage, Walter Ellison, a well-known financier in Boston. To the outside world, my father was the picture of success. Calm, composed, always appearing at major events in a sharp suit and a silver gray tie. But to me, he was just a man trapped in a photo frame above the fireplace. My mother died of a stroke when I was just 10. That morning I was putting on my school uniform when she collapsed right there in the kitchen. I still remember the sound of the glass shattering on the floor and how tightly she gripped my wrist before finally letting go. After the funeral, the house fell into a haunting silence. My father didn't cry. I couldn't stop crying. But he didn't hug me. He said nothing, except for one ice-cold sentence. "You need to be strong." Just a year later, he brought home a woman named Karen. Blonde curls, piercing blue eyes, and a smile so sweet it felt suspicious. She had a daughter my age named Chelsea. Chestnut hair, glittering eyes, and a chirpy little voice that never stopped. From the moment Karen walked into our house, she acted as though she'd always lived there. And Chelsea, she marched right into my room, pointed to my bookshelf, and said, "I could put my makeup stuff up there, right?" The wedding was quiet, understated. No celebration, no guests beyond a few of Dad's close friends. I wasn't asked, wasn't given a choice, wasn't even allowed to say no to sharing my room with Chelsea, even though my birth mother had left it to me as a sacred space of my own. That three-story house quickly felt cramped, filled with Karen's heavy perfume, Chelsea's chatter, and constant bickering echoing through the halls. That was when I started playing the role of the silent extra. No one ever told me to give up what was mine, but every day felt like a quiet command to step aside, give up Dad's attention, give up my seat next to him at the dinner table, fade out of conversations. Every time Chelsea walked into a room, all the air shifted to her. I was just the background. At 15, I won a full scholarship to a national science camp. I ran home, excited to show Dad the acceptance letter, hoping he'd at least rest a hand on my shoulder and say, "Well done, Maya." But he barely glanced at the paper, nodded, and set it down on the table before turning to Karen. "Would you rather have salmon or steak tonight?" And Chelsea? She screamed in delight. She'd just been chosen to model for an online makeup brand. The whole house popped champagne. I was in the kitchen, washing glasses. Every year, the difference grew more obvious. When I won a state science competition, Dad congratulated me over the phone. When Chelsea's makeup video hit 1 million views, the family threw her a party at a fancy Italian restaurant. When I got into Columbia University to study neuroscience, Dad sent a one-liner, "Good, work hard." For a long time, I thought maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe I was just jealous. But then came the moments that couldn't be ignored. On my 21st birthday, Dad sent an email. That same year, Chelsea's birthday was held on the rooftop of the Park Plaza Hotel. Over 70 guests, a private DJ, and a fireworks show scheduled by the hour. I stood at the doorway. I wasn't invited. Karen told me flat out, "This party's for Chelsea's friends. You wouldn't really fit in." Every time I achieved something, Chelsea had a way of turning it insignificant. When I was selected as a research fellow at Harvard Medical, she posted a story calling me New England's most boring bookworm. And Karen would just laugh it off. "She's joking, sweetie. Don't be so sensitive, Maya." When Chelsea dropped out of college at 20, she claimed school was blocking her creativity. Karen didn't object. She cheered her on and even moved with her to Manhattan to open a luxury makeup studio. The lease? Signed by my father. The startup costs? all covered by him. When I asked why, he simply said, I just want to support her path. I didn't get support. I paid for school with TA work and night shifts in the emergency room. Every time I tried to get closer to Dad, he stepped further away. My visits home lasted just hours, sometimes minutes. I'd be sitting on the couch and Chelsea would come gliding down the stairs in designer clothes, half sneering, half smug. Not working today? That's casual. I'd just smile, say nothing. I learned to endure, to stay silent, to smile while my heart felt like it was being crushed. I didn't want to lose my father, too. I had already lost my mother. But this house, this so-called home, it wasn't mine anymore. And maybe I wasn't part of it either. I thought I was used to loneliness, but I was wrong. Because deep down, I was still that 10-year-old girl standing in the kitchen, clutching her mother's hand, praying someone would look at her and say, "You're not invisible, you still matter." When I was 27, on a gray autumn afternoon, I got a call from Massachusetts General Hospital. A nurse, polite but urgent, said, "Mr. Walter Ellison was just admitted to the ER. It appears to be a minor stroke. He's stable now, but we need a family member here immediately." I froze. My chest tightened. No matter how many years I'd been pushed out of this family, I had never stopped being his daughter. I took time off work and caught the earliest flight to Boston that night. When I entered the hospital room, Dad was lying there, his powerful face now pale and twitching slightly at the corner of his mouth. His eyes were glassy, dazed. Karen sat beside him with a small bouquet, her expression stiff as stone. She glanced at me once, no greeting, no thank you. Just a whisper like an accusation. "Took you long enough." I walked to his bedside, laid my hand over his. His skin was cool and thin, blue veins visible under the hospital light. He turned to look at me, his eyes watery, trying to smile. "Maya," he whispered, weak but clear. 3 days later, he was moved to recovery. I barely left the hospital. I brewed coffee for the doctors, tracked every number, took notes like a medical assistant. Chelsea? She was in Bali. Her Instagram kept posting bikini shots, coconut lattes, and the caption, "Living each moment like tomorrow doesn't exist." I don't know if Dad saw, but I did. And every time I checked my phone for work, her photos popped up like a cruel reminder that for some people, blood ties mean less than a perfectly filtered selfie. As he regained strength, I brought him home for physical therapy. The doctor said a familiar, calm environment with trustworthy care was crucial. I suggested a private nurse. I would handle his medication and rehab schedule. Dad agreed. Karen said nothing. One morning over breakfast, Karen casually said, "I've been thinking we should sell the old house in Brookline, your mother's house. It's just sitting there. All it does is cost money." Robert, I put down my tea. "That's the house my mom left me. It's where I grew up. If no one's using it, why not ask me?" Karen gave a tight laugh. "Maya, you live in Chicago, you've moved on. Let's be practical. Your father needs financial stability now. Treatments, meds, caregivers, they're expensive." I looked at Dad. He was silent. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. A deep ache settled in my chest, part rage, part heartbreak. "I can pay for his treatment," I said slowly. "I have a right to keep that house." Karen tapped her spoon lightly on the plate. "Don't complicate things, Maya. I know you're smart, but you don't understand family finances. We're selling it. Your father already agreed." "Did he really agree?" I asked, turning to him. He still wouldn't look at me, just muttered, "Everything's a mess. I don't want more fighting." I stood up. The floor beneath me felt like it tilted. "Fighting? Or do you just not want to admit you've let someone else make every decision for your daughter for 20 years? Karen let out a cold laugh. "Maya, you're overreacting. We're trying to take care of your father, and you're the one making everyone uncomfortable." The whole family. That phrase stabbed into my chest like a cold blade. That house was eventually sold. I wasn't invited to sign the papers. No one ever asked for my opinion again. They packed all of my mother's memories into a few cardboard boxes and left them in the garage. I came to pick them up on a rainy afternoon. No one greeted me, no one said goodbye. Chelsea had just returned from overseas, but she didn't show up. Karen stayed in the kitchen, didn't come out, didn't say a word. After that afternoon, I left Boston. I moved permanently to Chicago and accepted a regional coordinator role at my nonprofit. I was busier than ever, traveling constantly, attending international medical conferences, signing partnerships with prestigious medical schools. But no one from the family called me, no messages checking in, no Christmas cards, no birthday texts. It was as if I had never existed. I didn't tell anyone I was hurting. But some nights, in the middle of red-eye flights, I wondered if Dad ever thought about me. If, when he saw Chelsea posting pictures of the two of them together, he remembered he used to have another daughter. A daughter who once waited for him in the hospital. A daughter who once thought he was the entire sky. 5 years. I never went back to Boston. Not once. Not for any reason. And what hurt the most was that no one noticed I was gone. 3 months before Chelsea's wedding, I received a handwritten letter. Not an email, not a text or a call, a real envelope delivered express to my office in Chicago. On the front were just 3 words, from Walter Ellison. I held it in my hand for nearly an hour before opening it. The paper inside was thin, the ink slightly smudged in places, the handwriting shaky, as if the writer had to pause many times just to finish a single sentence. Maya, I don't have much time left. There's something you need to know, and the truth must be told before I close my eyes. If you still have any trust left for me, come back to Boston. I read those words over and over again, my heart drifting in a fog. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't congratulations, it was a plea for help, and strangely, in that trembling tone, I felt the truth, something that had never been said. Something that might change everything. I cleared my schedule that same day, no warning. I didn't tell anyone in the family. I took the night flight, landing at Logan Airport at 3 a.m. in the crisp early autumn air. Boston was still the same, with the red brick of its historic buildings and the salty breeze drifting through the quiet night. Dad was in the old second-floor bedroom, the room where he used to keep a big bookshelf just for Mom when she was alive. That room was now quiet. Empty, but clean. When I walked in, he was lying on his side, eyes open, as if waiting. Martha, the old housekeeper, was reading a book by the window. She stood up as soon as she saw me, saying nothing, just offering a look full of understanding. Maya. My father said my name gently, as if summoning his own memory. I sat down beside the bed and quietly took his hand. He had lost weight. Colder than I remembered. But his eyes were still there, the eyes I'd begged to see throughout my childhood, eyes that were only for me. I read the letter, I said, my voice catching. I came back. He nodded, his eyes misting over. Thank you. We sat in silence for a while. No questions, no explanations, just presence. Then he spoke, his breath labored but clear. Chel's wedding is coming up. The whole family's busy, but there's something I need you to do. I waited for him to go on, my heart pounding. If something happens that day, if others speak before you, make sure they hear your voice, not theirs. He slowly turned over, reached into the drawer beside the bed, and placed a thick envelope in my hand. Give this to the priest before the ceremony, but don't open it. Don't read it. When the time comes, they'll know what to do. I held the envelope, feeling like I was gripping a thin rope stretched between 2 cliffs. What's inside? I asked. The answer to everything you were never given. I looked at my father for a long time. The man I once saw as a mountain now lay cracked before me. But in his eyes I saw something else. Not regret, but readiness. As if he had carried this weight for half his life, and finally he was about to let it go. Can I trust the person you chose to hand this off to? I asked. You'll know when you see him, he answered softly. He's the only one at that wedding who owes this family nothing. I didn't ask further. If Dad had kept this secret for so long, the reason had to be big enough for him to finally let me face it. One thing was clear, he had chosen me, not Karen, not Chelsea, to hold this truth. When I stepped out of the room, Martha was waiting in the hallway. "He's told you, hasn't he?" she asked quietly. "Not clearly, but I think everything's about to change." Martha nodded gently and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I hope this time he's not too late." I clutched the envelope inside my coat pocket and stepped out of the house I once called home, with the strange feeling that I wasn't returning for a wedding, but to bear witness to something that was never allowed to exist inside those walls. Something that might finally force everyone to truly see each other. I agreed to attend the wedding, not because I wanted to, but because Dad's words still echoed in my mind. "If something happens that day, let them hear your voice, not theirs." That line felt like a red thread, pulling me back into a crowd of glittering people I never truly belonged to. The wedding was held at a historic lakeside estate on the outskirts of Boston, once a retreat for the early century elite. From the entrance to the grand hall, white roses were everywhere. Candlelight shimmered inside glass lanterns hanging from maple trees, turning to gold. Everything looked like it stepped out of a bridal magazine, and Chelsea was clearly the princess this event revolved around. I arrived on time, dressed in a vintage, elegant emerald green gown. That color was a silent tribute to my mother. Martha had suggested it. "She used to say that color made your eyes glow brighter," she whispered while helping me fasten the bag. I walked into the hall with a heartbeat out of rhythm, but I kept my spine straight and eyes calm. Still, the welcome I received made me let out a dry laugh. A server pointed me to table 14, near the staff entrance, behind the buffet line. Beside me were two kitchen assistants in black uniforms and a middle-aged man adjusting a projector. I glanced around. At table 2, right in the center, sat people I knew well, former colleagues from Harvard where I had taught for a time. One of them saw me and asked in surprise, "Why are you sitting there?" But Karen's glance from across the room made her go quiet. I simply smiled and replied softly, "I'm used to places like this." Chelsea appeared like a movie star, wearing an off-shoulder sparkling gown, her hair swept up and studded with crystals. When she entered the ceremony, all the guests stood. I remained seated, not out of disrespect, but because I was just too tired to pretend anymore. The priest stood next to Chelsea and the groom, a young attorney from New York, handsome in a textbook way, but with eyes that lacked something real. When the room quieted down, he asked gently, "Before we begin the ceremony, does anyone in the family wish to say something to the bride and groom?" The moment Karen stood up, her champagne-colored gown shimmered softly with each step. Her voice rang out sweetly, perfectly pitched for a sentimental wedding clip. "Today, I am so proud to see Chelsea, my beautiful and resilient daughter, walk down the aisle, ready to begin a new chapter. Since she was little, she's always been the light of this family, always shining, always making everyone around her proud." I clenched my fists under the table, my nails digging deep into my palms. Every word was a blade slicing through memory. This was the same woman who once called me an emotional burden, who told me, "In the kitchen after a Christmas party, you always bring down the mood." The same woman who never once asked me about my life in Chicago, about my work, my awards, or anything that made me who I am. Karen continued with a soft, calculated smile. "Thank you, Chelsea, for always knowing how to love and hold this family together. You've healed our wounds. You've kept us united." I don't know why the priest turned his head to look at me right then. His gaze held no judgment, just a quiet reminder. I nodded slightly. He reached into the inner pocket of his robe and pulled out a thick envelope, sealed with red wax. It was the same envelope my father had handed me in that old bedroom 3 months ago. "Before we continue," the priest said clearly, "Ms. Maya, the bride's sister, left a few words. Mr. Walter Ellison wished for them to be shared today." The entire hall seemed to freeze. Wine glasses hovered mid-air, eyes darted about, a few awkward coughs. Karen stepped up quickly. "I don't think this is the appropriate time." But the priest had already begun reading. His voice was calm, steady, unwavering. I am Walter Ellison. If this letter is being read in front of you all, it means I no longer have the strength to speak these truths aloud myself. I lifted my head and looked directly at Chelsea. She was standing, the smile on her face now gone, replaced by confusion, suspicion. As the next lines echoed, her face slowly drained of color. I owe Maya an apology. The daughter I allowed to grow up in silence, in neglect, pushed to the margins of her own family. I stayed silent for too long, letting truth be twisted and letting her be hurt. I remained seated, silent. Not in triumph, not in revenge, just the bare reality of something that had always existed, finally acknowledged. If you are hearing this today, it's because the truth must finally be spoken, not for the sake of pain, but because it cannot stay buried any longer. I stopped looking at anyone. I just listened, the priest's voice echoing across a wedding ceremony that now felt like a stage, where I was no longer a background character, and maybe, for the only time, I was called by my real name. I hadn't expected my father's letter to hold more than apologies, but it was a map of memories, pulling back the curtain on everything I thought had been buried for good beneath the polished rug of our family history. The priest's voice carried each word like a final confession. Maya, I am sorry for letting you grow up in the cold, for not shielding you from injustices you should never have had to endure. I saw it all but chose silence. I thought if you were strong enough, you'd overcome, but I was wrong. No one should have to be strong alone, especially not at 10 years old. I heard a soft rustle somewhere among the rows of chairs. Someone was quietly wiping away tears. It wasn't me. I'd already cried enough. I'm sorry for letting Karen sell your mother's house, for watching your memories be boxed into a few cardboard containers and left at the door. That house was where your mom taught you how to bake almond cookies, where you fell asleep on the couch waiting for me to come home. I let it disappear, like it didn't matter. But to you it was everything, and I took that away. I glanced toward Karen. Her face was drained of all its usual blush. The words sliced through the carefully curated mask she wore. She sat still, but her hands clutched her dress so tightly her knuckles turned white. I'm sorry for pretending not to know Chelsea took money from the scholarship fund you created. That money was meant to help 3 underprivileged students in Atlanta pursue nursing degrees. But Chelsea used it to buy plane tickets, hotel stays, and a photographer for a trip to the Maldives. I knew, but when Karen begged me not to say anything, I chose peace over justice once again. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. A woman in a purple dress, probably from the groom's side, leaned in to whisper to someone. I looked at Chelsea. Her face was still, but her fingers had clenched into the lace fabric of her gown, nails digging in hard. You never had to win anything, Maya, because in my eyes you've already won. Not because of your accomplishments, not because of awards, but because you never gave up on this family. Even when we gave up on you. You came home to care for me when I was sick. You still sent Chelsea birthday cards, even when you got nothing back. You've been more patient, more loving than anyone else could have been. My throat tightened as if a stone had been wedged in my chest. I'd never asked my father to write any of this, but hearing it, his words, I realized just how deeply I had longed for them. I can't undo time, but if there's one final thing I can do, it's to let the truth be known, even if it's late, and to let you know, if tomorrow I'm no longer here, you are still the one daughter I regret, not loving the way I should have. The priest folded the letter. No one moved. No one spoke. No applause. No one stood to offer comfort. The silence was so heavy you could have heard a pin drop. Chelsea stood, her chair tilted back slightly but didn't fall. She walked slowly toward the aisle, all eyes locked on her. I stared back into her eyes, no anger left, only a vast emptiness. The woman before me wasn't the little sister who once braided her hair with mine, or the girl who used to call me Sissy with a sugary voice. I don't need his love, Chelsea shouted, her voice sharp and echoing through the hall. He always favored her, always treated her like some tragic saint worth protecting. What about me? Did I ever get to be chosen? Karen jumped up. Chelsea, stop it. This isn't the time. At the time, he stayed silent for years. And now he picks today, my wedding day, to turn it into a funeral for his shame? She yanked at her wedding gown, tearing a layer of white lace in a rip that cut through the air like a scream. Gasps echoed from the groom's side. The groom himself stood frozen, his face pale, unsure if it was from shock, rage, or fear. I don't want anything from him, not his money, not his love, not a damn thing, Chelsea said, then turned and stormed out of the hall, leaving behind her mother's desperate cries and the suffocating weight of a truth freshly unearthed. I remained seated, silent, hands resting on my lap, eyes unblinking. One sentence echoed in my mind. You are the daughter who deserves to be called mine. Even if it came too late, even in chaos, it had finally been said. I left the wedding under a cloud of hushed murmurs and awkward stares. No one saw me out. I didn't wait for anyone. My emerald green dress was still perfectly pressed, but I felt as though I'd just walked through a storm whose winds rose from inside me. When I returned to the old house on Beacon Hill, it was nearly dark. The antique gas lamps along the sidewalk cast a soft golden glow on the red brick walls. Martha waited at the door, still wearing her apron, eyes calm but carrying something else, something like resolution. He wanted you to have this, she said, handing me a heavy oak box locked with an old brass latch. I took it without a word. But Martha didn't leave right away. She looked at me for a long moment before saying, her voice rough with age, I've kept it for almost 2 years, just waiting for his permission. And today, well, today is the day. I carried the box to my old room on the second floor. Once a haven, then a dusty storage space. It had been cleaned and prepared. Like Martha knew I'd come back. I sat on the hardwood floor, leaning against the bed, turned on the lamp, and slid the key into the lock. The lock clicked open with surprising ease, as if time itself had waited long enough to finally let go. Inside the box, everything was meticulously arranged, each item separated by layers of soft paper, as if cushioning memories too fragile to touch. On top was a brown folder labeled, Confidential Will Copy. I opened it, flipping through each page. Near the end, one line was printed in bold, unmistakable letters. All assets legally owned by Walter Ellison, including real estate, shares in Ellison Financial, and trust accounts, shall be transferred in full to his sole legal daughter, Maya Ellison. I sat frozen. Each word struck my chest like a silent blow, shocking, but strangely gentle in its finality. He had said nothing while alive, but he left me everything, not just wealth, recognition, identity, the voice I'd spent a lifetime fighting to have. Beneath the will was a silver USB drive. I plugged it into the laptop Martha had already placed on the desk. 2 video files appeared, dated nearly 6 years ago. The footage was slightly grainy, taken from a high-angle security camera inside a bank branch in Back Bay. In the video, Chelsea wore a beanie and dark sunglasses. She stepped up to the counter, handed papers to a teller. The account was under my name. The signature was forged. Her voice was clear. I'm Maya Ellison. I need to withdraw the full trust amount for an urgent investment. Every move, every glance was captured. Undeniable, unforgivable. She hadn't just erased my work. She'd painted me as indifferent, while 3 low-income students lost their shot at nursing school because of a promise I made, and she shattered. I closed the laptop. My hand rested on the box, cold to the touch. Downstairs, I heard the soft clink of teacups and footsteps. I went to the kitchen, where Martha had already brewed 2 cups of chamomile tea. She pointed to the chair beside the table. Sit. Your grandmother used to read letters here every evening. I said nothing, but my tears fell into my palm as I opened the journal tucked at the bottom of the box. My father had written in blue ink, his handwriting firm and neat at the beginning, growing weaker and more unsteady as the entries went on. May 2nd. Chelsea is not my biological daughter. Karen was already pregnant when I met her. I've always known, but I loved Karen and I thought loving someone meant loving everything they came with. August 12th. I saw Maya standing in the rain, holding an umbrella over her stepmother and Chelsea while she was soaked through. When I asked why, she just smiled and said, "It's okay, I'm not cold." But I was. That was the moment I realized I was teaching my own daughter to survive by enduring. October 21st. I signed off on Karen selling Sarah's house. I heard Maya arguing, raising her voice for the first time. I saw her eyes, no longer seeking affection, only justice. I couldn't speak. I was a coward. I don't know how many pages I read, but there was one entry where I lingered. I've always feared that if I admitted Maya was the more deserving one, Karen would leave me. That cowardice cost me the one thing I should never have lost. Now I just hope that one day she'll forgive me, even if I don't deserve it. I closed the journal. There was no anger, no blame left, just the hollow space someone leaves when they choose silence over truth. But at least he chose to speak before it was too late. Martha poured more tea. He watched over you, you know. When you got that award at the Boston Medical Gala, he turned the TV on even when Karen said it wasn't worth it. When you were featured in Time magazine, he cut out the article, laminated it, and kept it in his private drawer. I looked out the window. Night had cloaked the quiet street. In my chest, a door opened, not because I had been acknowledged, but because I no longer had to prove that I existed in my own family's story. After that night, I didn't return to Chicago immediately. I rented a small apartment near Boston's financial district, discreet but close enough to observe what was happening. I had no desire for revenge, but I couldn't let what my father left behind be drained under the mask of fake familial love. I began by hiring an independent law firm, not based in Boston but in Philadelphia, to minimize risk of leaks. My lead attorney was Margaret Holden, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, a former federal prosecutor turned private counsel. She didn't need much from me. I handed her the will, the USB, and several documents my father had archived. She simply nodded, made notes, and said, "Let me do my job. Don't contact me until I call." 3 weeks later, I received a report over 500 pages long, along with a USB packed with financial data, contracts, and transactions buried under shell companies. Chelsea's name appeared repeatedly as beneficiary, shadow stakeholder, acting director, and co-owner of various accounts. Everything my father had once owned, from his Ellison Financial shares to investments in California, Florida, and New York, had slowly been restructured under false identities, mostly funneled through 3 shell firms managed by Karen and her private attorney. I wasn't angry. What I felt was emptiness. Because I knew if I hadn't returned, if that letter hadn't been read at the wedding, my father's legacy and final wishes would have been erased forever. And I, his only acknowledged daughter, would have been left with a few lines in a journal and a keepsake box passed down by Martha. I didn't file a lawsuit. I didn't call Karen. I sent one email to the Ellison Financial Board of Trustees, including all senior members, legal advisors, and family trust representatives. In it, I attached an executive summary of the investigation, a notarized copy of the legal will, and cited the specific clause where my father outlined contingency for disputed succession. 2 days later, I was invited to an emergency Zoom meeting. Chairing it was Mr. Gerald Knight, a senior board member who had worked alongside my father for over 30 years. He looked at me through the screen, voice steady. "Maya, do you accept the honorary directorship of the Ellison Foundation as the sole legal heir and the only party with clear evidence of financial misconduct?" I didn't lift my eyes from the desk. I answered plainly, "I accept, but I'm not pursuing criminal charges. I just want to protect what my father intended. The foundation was frozen temporarily. All asset transfers were halted. Karen was removed from interim leadership. Chelsea lost all account access linked to Ellison Financial. I received full system access, not to spend, but to ensure every dollar was used as intended for education, healthcare, and community projects. Exactly what my father wanted. 2 days after the internal news leaked to investors, Karen called me. I sat in my small apartment, the phone ringing again and again. I didn't answer, but by the third afternoon, I picked up. Maya, her voice was cold and shaky. What are you doing? You're destroying this family. Do you even understand the consequences? I stayed silent. She continued, louder. You're a poisonous snake, always jealous, always stealing. Are you satisfied now? I waited a few seconds. Then I replied slowly, each word falling into the silence between us. I didn't raise the snake, mother. The line went quiet. No response, no click, just the sound of ragged breathing on the other end. I hung up. Not because I needed to win, but because, for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the voice that had made me shrink for so many years. The small apartment remained quiet. I looked out the window. Boston was turning into autumn, yellow leaves drifting across rooftops, soft gusts of wind slipping through the cracks in the window frame. I didn't feel victorious. I felt peace slowly returning, as if after all the chaos I had finally become the keeper not only of my father's legacy, but of the truth he had long buried in silence. I wasn't surprised when the bank's security footage began spreading across social media, accompanied by bold red headlines like "Hot Influencer Chelsea Ellison Accused of Family Financial Fraud" or "Luxury Studio Built on Stolen Funds." But I wasn't the one who leaked the video. It was an independent financial journalist who had interviewed me at last year's Women in Finance conference. And after seeing my name in the Ellison Foundation's report, he launched an investigation. When the video appeared, I was staying in a small hotel in Portland, preparing for a speech at a nonprofit conference in the Northeast. I didn't check social media, but I knew Chelsea had lost her composure. The next morning, as I brewed coffee, my phone buzzed non-stop with messages from unknown numbers. Some apologies, some inquiries, but mostly news about Chelsea's studio undergoing emergency liquidation. She lost sponsorship contracts en masse. Within 48 hours, the online community uncovered a series of undisclosed sponsored posts and fundraisers where the promised money never reached its destination. I didn't feel happy, I didn't feel pain, I only felt emptiness. A few days later, I stood at a regional conference hosted by Bridges to Tomorrow, an annual gathering of leaders who founded charitable foundations, nonprofits, and community organizations across the United States. When invited to speak, they asked only one thing: please share what keeps you from giving up. I walked onto the stage in a simple charcoal gray suit, scanning the audience of diverse faces, ages, and backgrounds. There were founders of community schools from Atlanta, pastors from the Midwest, and single mothers who reestablished relief centers in New Orleans. I took a deep breath and began. My name is Maya Ellison. I used to be the child who wasn't invited to sit at the main family table. For nearly 20 years, I believed that if I studied harder and worked more diligently, my family would love me the way they loved my stepmother's daughter. The room fell silent. I used to think forgiveness was weakness, that if I let things go, I'd be pushed aside again. But in the end, when I let go of the need to be recognized, I found enough room in my heart to forgive, not to free others, but so I wouldn't carry that wound every time I closed my eyes. Some people shed tears, some stood and applauded as I left the stage, but what stayed with me was the gaze of a young woman backstage, an event assistant, probably in her early 20s, who came up, took my hand, and whispered, "I have a stepsister, too. I understand you more than you think." That night, back in my hotel room, I sat by the window, city lights reflecting softly on the glass. I thought of Chelsea. Beneath all the makeup, designer gowns, and smiling posts was a child who also grew up needing a father's love, acceptance, and a comparison to a sister who never stopped trying. I took a blank sheet of paper and slowly wrote 3 sentences. Not long, not fancy, just 3 lines. I forgive you. I have let go. You can choose to start over too. I didn't email it. I didn't want it to be an abstract gesture. I signed it, folded it, put it in an envelope, sealed it myself, and mailed it the next morning. I expected nothing. No apology, no reply. I only knew that inside me, the bitterness was gone. That same morning, as I walked through the hotel lobby to check out, a middle-aged woman called my name from a coffee table. She was the mother of one of the 3 students chosen years ago to receive the scholarship I'd established. She handed me a folder containing pictures of her daughter graduating from medical school last year, now working at a community clinic in Detroit. Thank you, Maya. Without you, she wouldn't be wearing that white coat, she said, squeezing my hand. You might not realize it, but from one act of fairness, you've planted something beyond money. Hope. I smiled without words, but my heart felt as light as a leaf. Because despite all the pain I'd endured, I finally understood. Forgiveness doesn't make us weak. It makes us truly free. March in Seattle brought a gentle chill I had never felt in Boston or Chicago. The weather wasn't biting cold, but the misty rain kept falling against the window pane, as if time itself stretched thin and translucent. I rented a small wooden house near Queen Anne Hill, overlooking Puget Sound. In the mornings, as the sun peeked through old pine trees, I brewed black tea, sat by the windowsill, and opened my laptop to read letters from collaborators for my new center. The center was named Hearthlight, meaning the light of home. Martha suggested the name when we worked together on the licensing paperwork. Every wall was painted in neutral tones, warm wood paneling lined the hallway, and the counseling room featured large glass windows to welcome natural light. I didn't open this place to be a savior. I just wanted to create a space where women who once felt out of place within their own families could be seen for who they truly are, without conditions. The first week, 6 women came. A Black woman in her 50s rejected by her biological children after a property dispute. A young Mexican mother kicked out by her in-laws for refusing an abortion. A lesbian woman cut off by siblings after coming out. They were different, but in each eye shone the same thing, the silent pain of being pushed to the margins of family. I didn't teach them to forgive. I didn't encourage holding grudges. Every Hearthlight session began with one question: do you feel like yourself today? And from there, every story could start. That December, I received a Christmas card with no recipient name, just a handwritten line in faint brown ink. If one day you want to meet again, I'm still here. I didn't need to see it to know the handwriting was Karen's. The card had no other words, no apologies, no excuses. But the shaky, slightly slanted letters were the same I had seen on bills my father never checked when I was a teenager. I placed the card on the mantel, neither burned nor stored, just left as a message unanswered. One morning in early January, while Martha and the center staff were preparing a New Year's group session, a white envelope in the mailbox stopped me in my tracks. No sender's name, just a faded photo printed on it, taken from afar. The image showed Chelsea, her hair tied back, wearing a simple white shirt, leaning down to hand bread to a child at an earthquake relief station in California. No one else was in the frame. She wasn't smiling, only quietly working, her hand resting gently on the child's shoulder, a gesture I don't remember ever seeing from her. I looked at it for a long time. The photo said nothing, but to me it was like an answer. Maybe Chelsea hadn't forgiven me. Maybe she still believed I ruined her life, but more importantly, she had started a journey of her own. Not to perform, not to get applause, but to quietly find herself beneath the layers that once weighed her down. That night, Hearthlight held a small, late Christmas party with colleagues, the women attending the center and Marta. She wore a green sweater with a snowflake on it, smiling brightly whenever she shared old stories about Walter and the snowy winters in the backyard. On the table were hot apple cider, butter cookies, cinnamon-scented candles, and soft jazz music playing. As everyone raised their glasses, I smiled, filled my cup, and slowly said, "To those who once hurt us, may they learn to love themselves too." No one spoke, but their eyes, each from a different place, all focused on me with the warmest silence I've ever known. In that moment, I was no longer Maya sitting by the kitchen at a wedding, no longer the daughter left unmentioned in a family card. I was just a woman learning how not to need to win over anyone, yet still keep her heart whole. My story may have ended in Seattle, but I believe each of us has an unwritten chapter, an unsaid word, a relationship yet to be healed. Maybe you've been, like me, pushed out of your own home, misunderstood, hurt so deeply you don't want to look back. But is forgiveness weakness, or the greatest strength we can give ourselves? What do you think about my choice? If it were you, would you send that letter? Would you come back if the one who hurt you reached out with open arms? I'm eager to hear your thoughts and stories, those quietly walking through wounds thought long healed. If you see yourself somewhere in this story, please leave a comment below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join me on more honest, heartfelt stories about family, pain, and healing. Because sometimes just one story can help us find a part of ourselves again.